0134 AM, January 8. Al-Asad Airbase, Iraq. The desert night is freezing, but the air inside the concrete bunkers is heavy with the sweat of terrifying anticipation. For the last 4 hours, American troops have been huddled in darkness waiting. Then the silence breaks, not with the whoosh of a defensive interceptor launching, but with a sound like a freight train tearing through the sky. In a span of minutes 11, Iranian ballistic missiles, each carrying a warhead weighing over 1,000 pounds, slam into the base with apocalyptic force. There is no Patriot battery to save them, no Phalanx CIWS to shoot these down. The ground doesn't just shake, it turns to liquid. Concrete blast walls weighing 4 tons are tossed like playing cards. Deep underground soldiers clutch their weapons as the overpressure wave passes through the earth, through the walls, and through their own skulls. The United States, the world's greatest superpower, is taking a direct beating, and its soldiers have only one defense: left hope. But when the dust settles, the real shock isn't the craters, it's what the blast did to the brains of the men who survived. To understand why American troops were left exposed in Iraq, we must rewind 5 days to January 3. A US MQ-9 Reaper drone silent and lethal fired Hellfire missiles at a convoy near Baghdad International Airport, killing Major General Soleimani, the architect of Iran's proxy wars. It was a decapitation strike that stunned the world. Tehran didn't just vow revenge. Supreme Leader Khamenei promised harsh retaliation. Intelligence agencies across the globe held their breath. Would Iran use its network of militias to plant IEDs? Would they launch a cyber attack? Instead, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, chose a path of direct state-on-state violence. They launched Operation Martyr Soleimani. The weapon of choice wasn't a suicide bomber or a cheap drone swarm, but the pride of Iran's arsenal: precision-guided short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs. This was a message written in rocket fuel. By targeting Al-Asad, the sprawling hub of US air power in western Iraq, Iran was signaling that it could reach out and crush American hard power at will. But here lies the critical failure in the US defense posture. Al-Asad, despite its strategic importance, was largely undefended against high-altitude ballistic threats. The Patriot missile batteries, the gold standard for intercepting incoming warheads, were stretched thin, deployed elsewhere in the region to protect Saudi oil fields and other assets from different threats. The base relied on point defense systems like CRAM counter-rocket artillery mortar, which are essentially automated Gatling guns designed to shred slow-moving mortar shells or drones. Against a ballistic missile diving at Mach 5 with a 500 kilogram warhead, a CRAM is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. The missiles didn't need to jam radar or use stealth technology, they simply flew into a gaping hole in the American shield. The strategic gamble was immense. If a single American soldier died, President Trump had threatened to strike 52 targets inside Iran. If the missiles missed, Iran would look weak. So the IRGC aimed for infrastructure hangars, runways, and equipment, hoping to break the base without starting World War III. But when you fire 15 missiles at a base full of people, precision is just a statistic until the dust clears. The first warning didn't come from a radar on the ground, but from 2,000 miles in space. The United States Space Force's Space-Based Infrared System, SBIRS satellites, staring unblinkingly at the Middle East, detected the intense thermal bloom of rocket engines igniting in western Iran. At the Combined Air Operations Center in Qatar, screens lit up. The trajectory analysis was instantaneous and terrifying. They were heading for Al-Asad. On the ground, the big voice, the base-wide public address system, cracked into life with a message that freezes the blood of every soldier incoming, seek shelter immediately. The base plunged into organized chaos, but unlike a mortar attack where you have seconds or a drone attack where you might shoot it down, this was a ballistic event. The flight time from launch to impact was less than 10 minutes. Commanders faced a brutal calculus. They scrambled to launch valuable aircraft, UAVs, and helicopters to get them out of the kill box. Pilots sprinted to their machines, taking off into the dark without lights to avoid being targeted. But for the hundreds of troops left behind, there was nowhere to go but down. They crowded into old Saddam-era concrete bunkers, relics from the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. These structures were designed to withstand artillery, perhaps a 500-pound bomb nearby. They were never tested against a direct hit from a modern 1,000-pound precision-guided warhead. Inside, soldiers packed shoulder to shoulder wearing body armor and helmets, writing final text messages that might never be sent. The air was thick with dust and fear. They knew the missiles were coming. They knew there were no interceptors. And as the minutes ticked by, the silence of the desert became heavier than the concrete above their heads. At 0134 AM, the waiting ended. The first Qiyam, one missile descending at terminal velocity, slammed into the tarmac of Al-Asad Airbase. The impact didn't just make a sound, it created a seismic event. A fireball erupted, turning the pitch-black desert night into a blinding hellish noon. The warhead, carrying over 1,500 pounds of high explosives, vaporized a maintenance hangar instantly. For the soldiers huddled in the bunkers nearby, the world dissolved into a violent, shaking blur. This was not the random, inaccurate rocket fire of militia groups that US troops had grown accustomed to. These were state-of-the-art weapons. The Iranians utilized the Qiyam, one a liquid-fueled, short-range ballistic missile SRBM with a separating warhead designed to increase speed and accuracy in the terminal phase. Following close behind were the Fateh 313S solid-fueled precision missiles with advanced guidance systems. They didn't just hit the base, they hit specific buildings. Inside the concrete shelters, the experience was terrifyingly physical. Survivors later described the sensation not as hearing an explosion, but as being hit by a truck while sitting still. The shockwave, a wall of compressed air moving faster than the speed of sound, hammered the bunkers. Dust and debris rained down from the ceilings, filling the air with a choking grey powder. The ground, usually solid bedrock, felt like it had turned to liquid. One soldier recalled watching the heavy steel doors of the bunker bow inward and snap back like a drumskin. Wave after wave of missiles arrived. Volleys of 3 or 4 would strike in rapid succession, designed to overwhelm any potential response and maximize psychological terror. The accuracy was shocking. One missile struck the sleeping quarters of the drone operators empty, only because of the early warning. Another pulverized the taxiway, where an evacuation aircraft had been parked just minutes before. The circular error probable CEP, the radius within which 50% of rounds will fall, was stunningly low, perhaps less than 10 meters. For hours, the barrage continued. Between the impacts, there was a deafening silence, broken only by the sound of burning jet fuel and the coughing of men in the dark. They were trapped in a concrete coffin, unable to fight back, unable to see, only able to feel the concussive blows of an enemy they had underestimated. The sheer kinetic energy transferred into the ground was immense. Even those who were physically untouched by shrapnel were being subjected to a different kind of violence over pressure. Their internal organs, their ears, and most critically their brains were absorbing the shockwaves of 1,000-pound warheads, detonating just meters away. As the dust settled and the fires raged, a haunting realization swept through the surviving troops. Why didn't we shoot them down? The answer revealed a glaring gap in American force posture. The Al-Asad Airbase, housing thousands of personnel and millions of dollars in aircraft, was defended only by point defense systems like the Phalanx CRAM. These automated Gatling guns are terrifyingly effective against slow-moving mortars or drones filling the air with a wall of tungsten at 4,500 rounds per minute. But against a ballistic missile diving at Mach 5, they are utterly useless. The CRAM radar sees the threat, calculates the solution, and realizes the target is moving too fast to engage. The primary shield against such threats, the MIM-104 Patriot missile battery, was nowhere to be found. In a calculated decision by CENTCOM commanders, the limited number of Patriot battalions in the theater had been prioritized elsewhere, defending critical assets in Erbil, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia against other regional threats. Al-Assad was left exposed, relying entirely on passive defense intelligence warnings to get people into bunkers rather than active defense to kill the arrows in the sky. This reliance on concrete over kinetic interception nearly cost the United States dearly. The bunkers designed decades ago by Yugoslav contractors for Saddam Hussein's Air Force were built to withstand near misses from 500-pound unguided bombs, not direct hits from modern precision-guided munitions with heavy warheads. If a single Fateh 313 had struck a crowded bunker directly, instead of impacting 10 meters away, the casualty count would have been catastrophic. The defense strategy worked only because of a combination of early warning from space and sheer blind luck. It was a stark reminder that in modern warfare, you cannot defend everything, and sometimes the soldiers on the ground pay the price for strategic triage. The missiles that turned Al-Assad into a lunar landscape were not the crude, tumbling scuds of the Gulf War era. They represented a generational leap in Iranian rocketry. The primary weapon used was the Qiyam, one a liquid-fueled short-range ballistic missile SRBM. Unlike its predecessors, the Qiyam-1 removed the external stabilizer fins, relying on thrust vectoring for control. This design choice reduced its radar cross-section, making it harder to track during the ascent phase. Crucially, it featured a separating re-entry vehicle RV. By detaching the warhead from the missile body in the upper atmosphere, the Qiyam One presents a much smaller, faster target for defense radars to lock onto during the terminal dive. Following up were the Fateh 313 missiles. These are solid-fueled, meaning they require almost no launch preparation time, a shoot-and-scoot capability that makes preemptive strikes by US aircraft nearly impossible. The Fateh 313 utilizes a combination of inertial navigation systems, INS, and global navigation satellite systems, GNSS, likely augmented by electro-optical sensors for terminal guidance. The result was a circular error. This level of precision allows a commander to choose not just which base to hit, but which hangar to destroy. However, the most devastating aspect of the attack was not the shrapnel, but the overpressure shockwave. When a 1,500-pound warhead detonates, it displaces air at supersonic speeds. For the soldiers inside the bunkers, the concrete walls stopped the metal fragments, but they could not stop the physics of high explosives. The blast wave compressed the air inside the shelters, creating a rapid spike in atmospheric pressure, followed by an immediate vacuum. This violent fluctuation passed through the soldiers' skulls, causing the soft tissue of their brains to slam against the hard bone of the cranium. This phenomenon causes micro-tears in the brain's neural connections, a condition known as traumatic brain injury, TBI. It leaves no visible scars, no blood, and often no immediate symptoms. But the damage is real, permanent, and debilitating. In the arithmetic of modern war, a $500,000 missile had inflicted hundreds of millions of dollars in long-term medical trauma without killing a single man. In the immediate aftermath, as the fires at Al-Asad burned down to embers, the initial report sent to the White House seemed miraculous. 0 KA killed in action. The bunkers had held. The world breathed a sigh of relief, believing the crisis had passed without blood. But this assessment was dangerously premature. Within days, soldiers began reporting severe headaches, dizziness, sensitivity to light, and memory loss. The diagnosis was not shell shock or stress, but mild to moderate traumatic brain injury, TBI. Initially dismissed by political leadership as headaches, the reality was far grimmer. Over 110 US service members were eventually diagnosed with TBI, receiving Purple Hearts for wounds that were invisible to the naked eye. The shockwaves had done what shrapnel could not. They had concussed an entire battalion without scratching their skin. Geopolitically, the strike was a watershed moment. For the first time in decades, a regional power had directly attacked US forces with ballistic missiles and gotten away with it. Iran had demonstrated escalation dominance, proving it could strike precise targets at will, forcing the US to choose between de-escalation or a full-scale war that no one wanted. The United States chose not to retaliate kinetically, signaling a strategic pause. However, the myth of American invulnerability in the Middle East was shattered. Every adversary from Russia to China took notes. You don't need a massive air force to challenge the US, you just need precise missiles and the will to use them. The Al-Asad strike proved that forward operating bases are no longer sanctuaries, they are targets. The sun rose over Al-Asad on January 8th to reveal a base that looked less like a military installation and more like a lunar landscape. Craters 30 feet wide scarred the taxiways. Hangars were twisted skeletons of steel. But the most haunting image wasn't the wreckage. It was the soldiers emerging from the darkness of the bunkers, dusting off the grey powder of pulverized concrete, checking their limbs, and realizing they were alive. This attack was a wake-up call written in fire. It proved that in the age of precision warfare, distance is no longer a defense. The Iranian missiles didn't just slip past American air defenses, they exposed a critical vulnerability in how superpowers project power. We learned that while satellites can see a launch and bunkers can stop shrapnel, nothing stops the physics of a shockwave. The 110 soldiers diagnosed with traumatic brain injury carry the invisible scars of a night where the world held its breath. As missile technology proliferates from the deserts of the Middle East to the Pacific, the lessons of Al-Asad are more critical than ever. We must ask, is passive defense enough, or will the next war require lasers and interceptors to stop the threat before it ever touches the ground? If you want to understand the future of warfare, look at the craters in Iraq. Thanks for watching, and keep your eyes on the horizon. Bye for now.